And we'll be looking at a text together in Colossians chapter 1. We're going to get there, so be patient with me as I kind of lay the groundwork for this incredible text. Colossians 1, verses 15 through 18, we'll kind of be focusing on. So I want to begin my inaugural journey as your pastor by dealing with some basic, here's how our life works kind of questions. I want to prepare you for a journey toward human flourishing by wrestling right up front with some most basic questions of our everyday, ordinary, crazy, surprising, difficult, delightful, disappointing, funny, frustrating, painful, happy, and sad lives. Did I cover the whole basis? Somewhat. For the next 8 weeks, I'll be attempting to lay the philosophical, theological, visional groundwork for what I hope to unpack with you for years to come. So if I came today with a suitcase, which I actually did bring, some people thought I might have had it just in case things didn't go well so I could take off quickly. If I came to you today with a suitcase and invited you to go on a journey with me, but I didn't tell you where we were going, would you not be a little bit curious what I had in the suitcase? Because it's the only clues you would have. Because whatever I have in the suitcase would be a clue to where we might be going. Now, I want you to think about that for a second, because that's what I'm attempting to do over the next 8 weeks. I'm attempting to unpack for you where we're headed without telling you exactly where we're going. Doesn't that make you confident? But here's the issue. On a pastoral journey, this is kind of how pastoral ministry works. See, a pastor doesn't exactly know where the church is supposed to go. Is that news to you? Because you might have thought wrongly that I have the answers to where we're supposed to go. I actually don't. I just have something in the suitcase that gives us some direction forward. And my suitcase is pretty much no different than any other pastor. It's not like the superstar pastors, they have a special, Mary Poppins kind of bag where they just pull out all this magical stuff. Like, whoa, where did that come from? How did they do that? That's not actually how pastoral ministry works. Because that's not how following Jesus works. You see, we're all dependent on God himself, aren't we? He's the only one who actually knows where this is all going. And so here's what the basic posture of Christianity is. Trust. Isn't that terrible? I'm a pastor, and I hate it sometimes. Because I have to come admitting that I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. I'm a broken human like you who needs Jesus desperately. And so I come with my little blue suitcase, and I say to you with sincere humility, will you join me on a journey? I don't know where we're going, but I know who knows. And so together, we're going to look to him and say, Lord, what do you want to make of this beautiful place we call First Baptist Church of Pittsfield? How do you want to use this group of people to impact this city? So that's what that suitcase is all about. I honestly do. I wish I had a pastoral Poppins kind of bag that I could pull things out and sing a song and everybody kind of march in line and follow and, the crowds would be drawn. And I wish I had a little magical pastoral wand of some sort. I could just touch the leaks in the building or whatever, and boom, it's all fixed. Or, change this, change that, do this. But I don't. In fact, we all have the same content that we're working with. to make sure this goes in the right direction. And that's actually what, metaphorically speaking, is in that suitcase. It's not anything you can't find in here, but I want to unpack for you over the next 8 weeks 8 ideas, 8 rhythms that are the basis of what we're going to be doing here for, Lord willing, the next 50 years. And it's really the basis of what every church should be doing. So it's not anything like, only I know this. We're going to look at the scripture and we're going to see what was the church doing from the very beginning. What were the rhythms that they put in place from the very beginning as they worshiped Jesus together. And so that's kind of where this is going. So I sent a video out to you. Maybe you watched it. It had a letter too. If you didn't want to watch the video, you could read it, okay? It talked about a few words that, there were 5 words. Maybe you remember them. Maybe you don't. I'll remind you again. But they are formation, application, I even said them wrong. Anticipation, imagination, remember the last 2? Transcendence, and hospitality. So what those represent are like the culture that we're trying to create here. Everything we do on Sunday morning is supposed to cultivate these 5 realities. But we're not going to be talking about those over the next 5 weeks. Those are going to be, next 8 weeks. Those are going to be woven into everything we do here. What we're going to be talking about over the next 8 weeks is the basic rhythms, the basic ideas for a flourishing life in a flourishing church. How does a church actually flourish? That's what we're going to be talking about. And so we're going to start with the first one. And see, what this is doing is this is building in us what's on the front of your worship guide, that surprising Christian imagination. So I'm starting with day 1 to try to open up your eyes and your heart to this thing called a surprising Christian imagination. What I mean by that is that when you understand what God is up to in His Word and through His Son, it's a big shock to the system. It's a surprise. And every time we come to church and we worship together and we open the scriptures, we should be like, oh, wow, now I see. It's like light bulbs going off in our heads. I see what God is saying. I see what Jesus is doing. And we kind of like hug each other and we say, that's amazing. Let's do this together. And every Sunday should feel like that. So that you are just waiting for every Sunday to come because you want to discover more about who Jesus is together with this group of people. So let's pray toward that. And let's start this morning. So let's start unpacking these basic questions, these ideas that will lay the foundation for our journey together. So I'm gonna work it out in light of a question, a very basic but big question. Okay, have you ever been sitting in church? This is honesty time. Have you ever been sitting in church zoning out? I just thought I'd do that because I'm going to point to myself. As a pastor, you can even zone out at times. Hey, So everybody's done it, right? Shake your head if you're yes. Okay, let's be honest. Everybody's honest. Thank you. You've been zoning out, thinking about what's for lunch that day, thinking about some conversation you had yesterday with some random person in the line at Market 32, and then you are suddenly jolted back to reality where you are here and now, which causes you to drop your Yeti mug, which echoes like a bomb on the pews throughout the whole auditorium. Everybody looks, to make sure everybody's okay. Is this a realistic thing? Because I did that a couple Sundays ago. I dropped something. I was like, I wanted to crawl into the pew, right? So, okay, this has happened to all of us. And then everybody settles back into the sermon or the song or the prayer, and you are left sitting there with this big question that just hits you like a Mack truck. And here's the question. What the heck am I doing here? Have you ever had this? You can be honest. I have. And you might mean it in both cases. What am I doing here on the earth? Maybe it's a big metaphysical question, or just simply, what am I doing here right now in this building? What am I doing here? I could be in bed still. I could be in front of the TV listening to the 3-hour pregame conversation leading up to another Bills game. Ooh. I could be knocking off a few chores on my ever-growing list of household repairs. I could be exercising. I could be doing the Bills. I could be binge-watching Severance one more time in preparation for the upcoming second season on January 17th. I could be doing so much. Why am I here? Have you ever asked this very legitimate question, by the way? If you haven't, you should. Why are you here instead of doing all those other wonderful things? I'd like to take a shot at answering that question this morning, at least in part. What are we doing here in both cases? What are we doing here on this earth year after year? And what are we doing here in this building Sunday after Sunday? And I want to suggest to you there's a three-part answer to this question, and it's in the title of the sermon that's also in your worship guide. You can look at the title of the sermon, and you will know the answer already. Here's what I'm proposing the answer is. Here's what you're doing here. You're following Jesus into the heart of all things. Now, there's one word I left out in there that's part of the answer, because I can't just give you everything right up front, okay? But I want to break this down for the last few minutes, answering this question. And if when I'm done, if this doesn't give you theological goosebumps, something is wrong with you. Because this is like, what I'm going to break down for you is so transformative and mind-boggling. To answer that question, I mean, what if you had the answer to the question, what are you doing here Sunday after Sunday, or right now? What are you doing on this earth? What about that answer? The answer is the same for both. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So I'm going to attempt to do that using the scriptures, particularly Colossians 1. I'm going to be using a lot of different scriptures, but particularly Colossians 1 will maybe help us the most in one particular aspect of this. But first, I just want to say it this way. So here's what we're doing here. First of all, we are following Jesus. It's that simple. What we're doing here Sunday after Sunday, and what we're doing here on this earth as Christians, that we call ourselves Christians, is we're following Jesus. There's a little gray book, a little tiny gray book that I like called Follow Me by Jeremy Treat. He's a pastor out in Los Angeles. And he points out that in the New Testament, the word Christian, how many times do you think the word Christian is used in the New Testament? Any guesses? We use it all the time. It's used three times. The word believers, how many times do you think the word believers is used in the New Testament? We use that word a lot too. Not many, 15 times. When people are referred to as believers or Christian. You know what word is used 235 times in the New Testament? The word disciples or followers. Because they're kind of the same thing. I think the New Testament writers might be helping us answer our question with all this repetitive clarity. Over and over, they look at these people who are doing whatever it is we're doing, and they say, those are followers of Jesus. Those are disciples. So we as Christians should be doing here, apparently, whatever it is disciples, or to use another similar word, followers, whatever it is they do. What do disciples or followers do? Well, in the ancient times, so I'm going to talk about the ancient times a number of, often here, because this Bible wasn't written today, correct? It was written in an ancient Near Eastern context. So sometimes we have to kind of like transport ourselves back to that time and say, what was going on then so we can make sense for ourselves now? Does that make sense? Okay, so in the ancient times, discipleship wasn't an uncommon thing. You would have a teacher or a leader who would express ideas in a public space, and that would attract a crowd. People would start to come and they would listen to see what this person had to say. And if what they had to say was compelling, what would happen inevitably would be there would not only be a crowd that would be drawn, but disciples would start to kind of say, hey, I want to go, whatever you're talking about, I want to do that. I want to follow you. Can I join in this thing, whatever you're doing? Can I join in this group? And so you had these teachers or rabbis or leaders that would collect these followers. And so very early on in Jesus' ministry, he went and he gathered what? Some followers. We call them the disciples. He gathered 12 people that would be his followers. He said to them, come and follow me. So that invitation to come and follow Jesus is still the invitation for you and I. We are followers of Jesus. We're people who take seriously the life and wisdom of this leader or teacher that we call Jesus, and we are invited to join him in his way of doing life, his reason for doing it. And so it's about practices for life. It's about purpose in life. It's about I'll follow your example kind of posture toward life. But it's all focused on who? Jesus. I mean, it's kind of a joke in church, right? Where you ask a question and the answer is always Jesus. Do you know that that's not a joke? That's legit. Because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be right. Who do we love? Who do we follow? Who's our example? The answer is always Jesus. This is the essence of what it means to be a Christian. It is why you come here every Sunday, to figure out who Jesus is, what he's up to, and how you can follow in his example. It's not crazy in a crazy way complicated, is it? It's pretty straightforward. Now, since being a disciple is simply a term that describes an approach to life that follows someone greater or wiser than oneself, at the heart of our answer, what are we doing here, has to do with direction and who we're following. So, the question that should come to your mind, if you're tracking with me, okay, and if you haven't zoned out yet, if you do, I'll try to pop you back into place. But right now, if you're still tracking with me, the question that should come to your mind, especially if you're new to this thing called Christianity, or maybe you're not a Christian, it should be, why do I have to follow Jesus? I mean, why can't I just follow my own wisdom, my own experience? Why Jesus? And I think that's a legitimate question, don't you? Shouldn't that be kind of like the fundamental question? Why is it Jesus that we've come here Sunday after Sunday to follow? And so I just want to give you a couple of reasons, at least so you can kind of settle this part of it in your heart a bit. And I'll give you a few, but there's some we could spend the whole year just answering this one question in the scriptures, okay? So let me just give you a few. We follow Jesus because he's the greatest human who ever lived. Remember? The greatest human who ever lived. See, this all ties together. Everybody see that? It's all woven together. He is the greatest human that ever lived. So I don't know about you, but I want to follow the greatest. When I was growing up, I wanted to be like Michael Jordan. I mean, and this is not a joke. I had posters of him on my wall. I watched videos. I loved basketball. I played basketball all my life. I watched videos of him sticking his tongue out, doing his crazy dunks. I would practice on little mini hoops because I was always short, so I couldn't do it on the 10-foot, but I could do it on, smaller. I wore the clothes. I wanted the shoes. Mom and Dad, please give me the Air Jordans, It helps you jump higher. And then they came out with this song. I don't know if you remember it back in the day. Sometimes I dream that he is me, like Mike. If I could be like Mike, wanna be. That was the theme of my life. And then I grew up to only 5'8". There went that dream. I'm still bitter about that. No, I'm not. I do occasionally still pray, Lord, could you just do a miracle and just make me 6'5" for a couple of days so I go down the Y and just, He's never done it. But we follow Jesus just like I followed Michael Jordan because he was the greatest basketball player that ever lived. We follow Jesus because we look around at humanity and we see Jesus, his life, his teaching, the way he dealt with people, his death, his resurrection, his tears, his laughter, his creativity, his faithfulness, his purposefulness. And we say he is literally the greatest human that ever walked on the planet. So I want to be like him. That's just the first reason. We follow Jesus because his attitude, his purpose, his heart motivation was for the good of others. He literally walked around moving out for the good of others. Have you ever met somebody like that? It was not about them. It was about loving and serving all those around them. When you've been with a person like that, it is a beautiful thing. And that's how Jesus was, which is why we follow him. I mean, everybody walks around with their own theme music, you know? And you got to kind of feel people out to get their vibe. Some people, not everybody has like Rocky IV theme music, you know, like some people it's more like this like sad theme music, you know what I'm talking about? Their vibe's kind of like this kind of sad, like Eeyore kind of vibe. Some people have this like kind of fearful theme music, or some people it's like always a party, you know, like there are people that are fun to be around, you know what I'm saying? There's like their theme is always a party. Some people it's like money music, some people it's like guilt music, some people it's whatever kind of music. But the point is, it's the center of our existence without realizing it. Does that make sense? But Jesus lived his entire life with a heart set on the good of others. His theme music was the good of others, which is, by the way, really strange to be around somebody like that, who literally is posturing their heart and life for the good of others. And there's not many people that you're going to be around that you're going to feel that coming off them. But when you do, it's refreshing. And that's why we followed Jesus, because this was his life. If you don't believe me, look at Luke chapter 4, 16 through 21, Philippians 2, verses 1 through 8, and text after text that shows how Jesus moved out for the good of others. We also followed Jesus because his teaching was charged with authority and dripping with authenticity. Remember what people said after listening to perhaps the greatest sermon ever preached? Do you know where the greatest sermon ever preached is found in the Bible? Probably Matthew 5. He opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the peacemakers." The people were just sitting on the edge of their little tree trunks or whatever they were on, because at the end it said they were amazed because he taught them with one having authority, not like the scribes and Pharisees. And this is why we follow Jesus, because his teaching is charged with authority and dripping with authenticity. We also follow Jesus because of not only his unrivaled humanity, but because he was and is one with the Father and the Spirit and is eternally united in the love and glory of the Godhead. This one's so big, I'm even nervous to get into it because I don't want to blow your minds quite yet. But he was not only a great human, a great neighbor, a great teacher, a great leader, he was all that he is and eternally united in the divine community of the Godhead. If I had music for this moment, it'd be like, how do you describe that? Just with a triangle? How do you describe the Trinity, the unity, the loving dance of the Father, Son, and Spirit for all eternity? How do you describe that? But this is why we follow Jesus. Because he is one with the Father, and he is the one who was with the Father in unity, who invaded our time and space, and walked our streets, tasted our food, lived among us. He was both human and divine, and he literally invaded our lives, bubbling over with love and grace for all. Should I keep going? Or should we just stop? I'll keep going. We follow Jesus because he is the only one who can bring us into the heart of all things by his death and through his resurrection. This is why we follow Jesus, because he is the only one who can lead us into the heart of all things. We could look text after text. Like I said, we're only going to look at one today because we only have time for one, and I'm keeping an eye on my clock because we literally are almost done. So I want you to see the text. So what are we doing here? Here's the answer. We are following Jesus, and the little word that's missing here is we are following Jesus together. It's implied when I say, what are we doing here? Following Jesus into the heart of all things. It's implied that we're doing it together. But I want to say it so that you know that you can't follow Jesus individually very well. Christianity wasn't even made to be an individual thing. Christianity has always been about the body. So we do this together. It's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. And so we do this together. We follow Jesus together. You need to help me follow Jesus. You say, wait, what? You're the pastor. I know, but I need help. You help me follow Jesus, and I help you follow Jesus. And you guys help each other. That's how Christianity or following Jesus works. And then the final thing is we're following Jesus together into the heart of all things. So in closing, I want you to see the text. You can take it home and you can wrestle with it and you can think about it. This text is one of the most mind-boggling texts in all of Scripture, and it's a song. Don't you just love that? Do you know what you do when there's something so big and so beautiful that you can't quite put it into words? What do, Wanda? What do? You sing it. That's why I was pointing to Wanda, because she's the metaphor herself of singing. You sing. This is why theater and Broadway works and will forever go on. Because there's some concepts that cannot just be said, they must be sung. And so right in the heart of the letter to Colossians, Paul breaks out into song. Most scholars believe that Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 and following is a hymn. We call it the Christ hymn. So I'm not going to sing it because I don't know what Paul's melody were, what the early church was singing, but I'm just going to read it to you. This is getting us into the heart of all things, and with this we'll close. He is the image, speaking of Jesus. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and all things on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers, all things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. If you could only get your heart and head around that one text, it would change your entire existence. Paul is singing, not just saying, with the early church. He is singing and he is saying that everything you see is because of Jesus. And if Jesus didn't hold all things together, the very world, the cosmos itself, would fall in and cave in on itself into chaos. And that everything that was created was ultimately created for him. And you wonder, why is it created for Jesus? Why does he get to be the one that everything is created for? And that answer is another answer for a sermon for another day, but I'll give you a hint toward it. In 1 Corinthians, it tells us the answer, because when Jesus is given, when he reconciles all things in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, it says that he turns around and gives it to the Father. And he's the only one who can do that. Do you understand that this explains to us why we are following Jesus together into the heart of all things? That Jesus is reconciling all the mess of our lives and all the pain and all the disappointment and all the sadness, all the junk of our lives. He's reconciling it not just for us, but for the whole world, so that he might come to have first place in everything. This is why we are here following Jesus together into the heart of all things. You say, well, how does this help me tomorrow morning? Well, when the alarm goes off, after you do your stretches or whatever you do, take your medicine, whatever it is, those first things you do, you can remind yourself of what you're actually caught up in. You are caught up in a cosmic, universal, jaw-dropping story where Jesus is drawing you and us together into the heart of all things. This is the story you are in. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber or a pastor, if you work at a grocery store or a coffee shop, or you stay at home, you're retired. It doesn't matter. You are caught up in something mind-boggling, and together we're following Jesus into the heart of all things. I don't know about you, but that gives me a reason to wake up every morning. It gives me an answer to why am I here on this earth or in this building? And then what happens is we gather every Sunday and we look around at each other and we remind ourselves that this thing we called following Jesus is a community project. So with that,